Okay, for 1122, they're giving us a function and they want us to find the new expression for below. And then they want to describe. I'm not as big on the description as I am on the finding the value. So we have f of x minus 1. So f of x is x minus 3 squared. So this is x minus 3 squared. And then we have the minus 1. And you cannot leave it like that. The book is going to leave it like that in a lot of its answers, but you cannot do that, right? So we have to multiply this out. So we get x squared, right, minus 3x, that's minus 6x, plus 9, minus 1. So we get x squared minus 6x plus 8. And you should leave it in that form. If we wanted to describe what happens, the graph is, so we're subtracting 1, is going to shift down, a unit. Okay, let's do B. We have negative 1 times f of x. And remember, f of x is x minus 3 squared, so we get x minus 3 squared. And again, you cannot leave it like this. The book is just going to write it as negative x minus 3 squared, but we actually have to multiply this out. So we get negative 1 times x squared minus 6x plus 9. We distribute in, we get negative x squared plus 6x minus 9, right? Unless a question says to leave in factored form, we cannot leave it in that way. What would happen with this graph when we multiply by negative 1? It's going to flip it, right? So 1 is going to open up, 1 is going to open down. So it's going to actually reflect that parabola over the x-axis, right? Because if it starts out like this, right, when I multiply by negative 1, it's going to end up like that, right? Assuming this was the x-axis, right? Okay, let's do C. Let's make space. C, we have f of x minus 1. So this means I'm going to substitute x minus 1 in for x up here, right? So I get equals, and it's not x minus 3, because now x is x minus 1, so it's x minus 1 minus 3 squared, right? And again, we would simplify this. We would get x minus 4 squared. Now the book will probably leave that, but you cannot unless it says leave it in factored form. So we get x squared minus 8x plus 16, right? F of x minus 1. And for this one, for C, when we do that, when we subtract 1 inside the parenthesis like that, it's going to shift it to the right, 1 unit. It's going to shift it to the right 1 unit. Okay, on D, let's make space. D, we have f of negative 1x. So wherever I see an x, I'm going to put negative 1x, right? So x minus 3 becomes negative 1x minus 3 squared, right? Again, the book will leave it like this. They'll probably leave it like this, right? But again, unless it says leave in factored form, which it doesn't. So for this one, I get x squared, right? And then think, if you can't do this in your head, by the way, like I've been doing, this is really negative x minus 3 times negative x minus 3, right? So the first two terms give us x squared, and then the next ones would give us plus 3x, right, plus 9, right? So this becomes plus 6x plus 9, right, f of negative 1x. And for D, when we multiply by negative 1 inside the parentheses, it's actually going to reflect this over the y-axis. So remember when we multiplied by negative 1 for B, here outside it reflected it over the x-axis. It changed the parabola going up and down. When I multiply by negative inside the parentheses, it's actually going to rotate it over the y-axis.